Excellencies, distinguished delegates, dear colleagues, I declare open the meeting of the Intergovernmental Negotiating Committee on the United Nations Framework Convention on International Tax Cooperation. Today, the committee will continue its deliberation of Item 4 Framework Convention, and we're gonna resume our discussions actually today on the issue notes of the work stream 1. And I think yesterday we start with general comments on the whole work of the work stream. Then after that we start diving in the commitments. We start with effective dispute prevention and resolution. Then after that we move to sustainable development. We finished both of them, and we end up with discussions on the fair allocation of taxing rights. We started yesterday, but we didn't finish, and here now we are resuming these discussions and again putting this topic for discussion on the floor. So I don't prefer long introductions. I would prefer to go directly to the discussions and open the floor to resume receiving the interventions and comments on this topic and how countries see this commitment should look like, what it should include, what level of details. We already have a high level commitment, or this is mentioned as one of the commitments that should be there in the TORs. So we have a certain language for this in the TOR, but I think in the convention we need to go a little bit further and elaborate more in this convention, in this commitment. So here we're trying to hear two different perspectives, what countries are looking for or what they are expecting to see in the commitments that will come on the framework convention under this item. Because the purpose of this plenary is to get the directions from the member states. So in the next phase, when we are starting to draft the text, we know exactly what is the direction and how we can move forward and come with something within the expectations of the member states, so we can discuss it in Nairobi and in the following sessions. So given that, here I'm saying that, repeating again that what now we are discussing, what should exactly come under this commitment, given what everyone read in the issue notes. Of course, we are not only limited in the issue notes. If there is proposals or comments that go even beyond this and elaborate more, it's more than welcome. This is the purpose of our meeting. So looking forward to hear a lot from you about this. And now the floor is open for everyone. Thank you. Okay, so if no one asking for the floor, so I will take the floor. And okay, now, distinguished delegate of Germany, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I'm glad I can do you a favor by breaking the ice. I think I can keep it brief, so it is only to share with you what we have already provided in writing, and that is this. And we believe that paragraph 14 in the issues note is a good starting point. for our further consideration, and Germany primarily acknowledges the diverging views on fairness in international taxation. What is also stressed in paragraph 14, economic substance, value creation, administrative simplicity, those are principles we can align with. And I hope that this intervention could steer up more to come. Thank you.
Thank you. Distinguished delegate of China.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, colleagues. First, I would like to thank the co-lead and the secretary for preparing the draft. Yes, this is a very good start for our further discussions. I have several comments in order to give answers to the two questions in the paragraph 15 in the note. First, regarding the first line of paragraph 14, saying that the commitment should urge parties to agree on an approach to the allocation of testing rights. I think we are committed to explore and stipulate something to achieve fair allocation of testing rights, including equitable taxation on multilateral on MNEs, as already stipulated in the paragraph 10, subparagraph A in the TOR. I think we are now in the right track. We are on the way to that goal, but it is not necessary to apply the languages like urge parties to do something or not. Because at the end of the day, I think whether to agree or not will be subject to every member state sovereign right to decide, which is reflected in paragraph 9, subparagraph B. That's the first comment. The second comment is a question, actually, the concept of business activities. I think already mentioned by some other colleagues in the previous discussions, the definition or the notion of business activity, under the name of business activity or economic activities, whether it will include those activities in the traditional business or that in the new model business. I think we should have a consistent wording on that, and more importantly, a consistent understanding and position on that. And then we can discuss how to capture such activities in our tax base with necessary and possible sourcing rules and certain thresholds. That's the second point. Finally, regarding the second question of paragraph 15, we will highlight the notion of simplicity, which is reflected in the paragraph 9b in the TOR. And we would like to add or highlight that it's a matter of importance to avoid creating, we are trying to have some kind of simple rules, so we are trying to avoid creating complex or fragmented rules. In that sense, I think it will lead to double taxation or over taxation or tax disputes and do harm to the cross-border investment and trade. So that's something or additional concern we'd like to highlight for paragraph 14. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Distinguished delegate of India.
Thank you, Chair. And we did take the floor yesterday, and we did make our comments. So our comments today are more to create a further discussion, if possible, because we believe that without that, we will not be able to get to a meaningful conclusion of the work over here. A point that we would like to make, hearing some of the views around the room, is that when we speak, there has been a lot of discussion about the manner in which the commitments need to be elaborated over over the manner in which they appear in the terms of reference. We believe that each commitment will have to be looked at a little differently, depending on whether that commitment is a kind of a general commitment in which we adhere to certain principles, or it is a commitment that deals or that would feed into some of the protocols that we are negotiating right now or that we seek to negotiate in the future. So if we can find that this is a commitment that is actually going to reflect in the work of some of the protocols that we are negotiating, then we need to be extremely careful in the manner in which we elaborate the language of that commitment. While probably those are the commitments which will require certain elaboration. So this is one such commitment. This commitment on fair allocation of taxing rights, because this forms the basis of much of the work that we will do in the future on the protocols. So it is in this context that we made our comments yesterday, that the language that we use should be very carefully chosen. And that is why we had raised this point about the use of the phrase business activity. When Resolution 78-230 had already spoken of economic activity, or where value is created, or where revenues are generated. So it is better to use the language that we already understand. And yes, I agree with my distinguished delegate from China who spoke about the use of the word urge, because eventually these commitments are a call to action. So it is something that we agree to do. So I think the commitment should simply say that the party, this is a suggestion, that the parties to the convention agree to a fair allocation of taxing right, recognizing that every jurisdiction should share the taxing rights based on where economic activity occurs, value is created, or where revenues are generated. And as to the matters of tax neutrality, simplicity, and administrability, we agree that this is important. But probably placing this within the commitment per se may not be a very, it may not be very useful, because this is part of the principles. So our commitment, while elaborating on what we seek to do, it should also be crisp and to the point. Thank you.
Thank you, India. And actually, I share this view with you as well, because the taxing rights is, from my personal perspective, I think it is the core of the whole convention and our whole work, that or most of the work that will be carried on. And we will come across this concept again when we are discussing next week the first protocol, because the first protocol on services, it depends a lot on this concept. That's why we're giving this concept bigger space of time to be discussed. So that I think for member states, while they are intervening, it's very good to consider that this concept will be the basis for next week's discussion. So whatever we're gonna elaborate here and discuss, I think we will need to reflect on it again when we come to discuss the services. Thank you, India. Distinguished delegate of Norway, followed by Spain.
Thank you, Chair. And let me start by congratulating and thanking the co-lead and the Secretariat and you, Chair, for preparing the draft issues note. On the commitment on fair allocation of taxing rights, we agree that it's a core commitment of this convention. We also recognize that the concept of fairness is inherently subjective, as also stated in the presentation, and was also evident in the discussions in the work stream. And we certainly agree very much with what was said by the African group and India yesterday, that we should keep this commitment a fairly high level. And it's important to ensure that this commitment and others are future-proof. Nevertheless, the issues that are addressed in the second part on the screen here, that relates to economic principles, we find them very helpful in assessing what could be fair, because to us, regardless of whether business models and business may change over time, and that's where we see the importance of ensuring that the Framework Convention is future-proof, these economic principles remain constant, and we think that they can form a good basis for our discussions going in the future, now next week, and in this process, but also in the future when discussing new issues under the convention. So we would agree that there are many words here in paragraph 14 speaking to that, and maybe it could be streamlined, but we think it's important to anchor the assessment of fairness in those basic economic principles that we think can serve as a starting point for all member states. So thank you.
Thank you, Nuwei. And to your point about it should be kept on a high level, that's what we need to elaborate more. So what certain high level we are talking about? The same as it's mentioned in the TOR? And if we did so, what is the added value in the convention than the TOR? And so to what level of details that we need to go that it's considered still on a high level? So this is maybe like a question, not for Norway, but like for everyone as we are discussing. So because usually we hear this and we heard it yesterday, that it needs to be kept on a very high level. So what do we mean by very high level? It's just to have a common understanding for the terminologies that we are using here in our discussion. So very high level, which means the same as the TOR, more detailed, and to what level of details? Thank you. Distinguished delegate of Spain, followed by Brazil.
Gracias, presidente. Quería agradecer en primer lugar al coordinador de la línea de trabajo su dedicación durante todo este tiempo en la preparación de la nota temática sobre el reparto justo de derechos de gravamen. Efectivamente, creemos que es un buen punto de partida para futuras discusiones, como han señalado otros delegados que han hablado antes que yo. Y como señala el propio párrafo 13 de la nota, entendemos que el concepto justo es indeterminado y subjetivo, pudiendo resultar difícil llegar a un consenso sobre a qué exactamente nos estamos refiriendo. Nos congratulamos, en todo caso, que la nota temática haga referencia a principios económicos como guía para futuras discusiones, tales como eficiencia, neutralidad fiscal, simplicidad y a la importancia de los efectos de la tributación sobre el comercio y la inversión transfronteriza. Entendemos, por otra parte, que el grupo de trabajo podría avanzar su trabajo en relación con la tributación de los servicios transfronterizos en una economía globalizada, digitalizada, con independencia de la inclusión o no de un compromiso específico al respecto en la Convención Marco, y abogamos, en consecuencia, por un compromiso definido de una manera de alto nivel que permita flexibilidad y consenso. Gracias.
Thank you. Distinguished delegate of Brazil, followed by Czech Republic.
Thank you, Chair. We have a similar view as expressed by India. The detailed nature of the paragraph 14 could impede the future application and interpretation of the commitment or fair allocation of taxing rights. By specifying a precise approach and condition, it risks limiting flexibility and adaptability, which may make it difficult to respond to unforeseen economic change. A more principled commitment would be more resilient, enabling future adjustment, ensuring the agreement remains relevant and effective over time. So, thank you.
Thank you. Distinguished delegate of Czech Republic, followed by Portugal.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for giving me the floor. And first, let me thank to our co-lead for he's leading during the workstream 1 work. It was very helpful. Thank you very much, and also thank you for the presentation. So first, my question regards the principles mentioned on the slides, because we don't see mentioned ease of administration there, whereas in issues notes there ease of administration is mentioned. So we just would like to see if there is any difference or if it's just a typo. And then we agree with what the distinguished colleagues from Norway and Spain mentioned about the principles mentioned here. We also find them as a very helpful guidance. On top of that, we would also like to suggest that the principles of equity, economic efficiency, and ease of compliance and administration are also mentioned explicitly in the principles. When we are drafting the Framework Convention, we believe that this addition will make drafting of the Framework Convention's provisions easier and perhaps even more straightforward. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Delegate of Portugal.
Much, Mr. Chair. And let me start, since this is the first time that I take the floor during this session, to show our appreciation for all the work that has been done so far by yourself, the Chair, also by the UN Secretariat, and having in attention what is our agenda for today, we must reserve our compliment, our biggest compliment to our co-leads in respect of what has already been its work, sharing our workstream 1 meetings, and also, of course, the draft issue note that we are somehow commenting nowadays. In response to your answer, probably I could say that from our side, we go along the issues note when it points to the commitments to being expressed in broad or high-level terms. We believe that this is, in general, an adequate and appropriate approach for us to draft these commitments that will be on the Framework Convention. However, we are aware that this approach can have, as a danger, there is some dangers in this approach. And the biggest one probably is that being too much high level or using too much broad terms, we end up with too much vague commitments, and this is a danger that we believe that we'll put ourselves in a situation where we don't have the necessary certainties in respect of what are we committing to when we sign on the Framework Convention. And this can hinder a broader and meaningful participation of member states in this initiative, which I believe we should try to safeguard and not create the conditions for this to happen. I recall that when the ad hoc committee approved the TOR, they were not approved by consensus, and therefore I feel that if we limit ourselves in this road to the Framework Convention to repeat what is on the TORs, probably we are not being that inclusive in respect of the reserves and the doubts that some delegations already had in respect of such streamlined commitments. Therefore, we are somehow expecting that through this exercise we can have a more clear idea and text of what that commitments can be. And in this case, or when we arrive to this point, I think that in respect of the fair allocation of taxing rights commitment, we believe that what is on the issues note is in fact a good starting point for our works, be it in respect of what is in paragraph 14, be it in respect of what is in paragraph 15. We are pleased that the commitment recognized the value of economic efficiency, tax neutrality, simplicity, administrability, as well as the possible effects on cross-border trade and investment. We believe that these are crucial areas of this commitment that we have to discuss and have some ideas about it. The same way, we accept that explanations of how we will determine where business activity takes place will be, in fact, a dimension to dealt with on other stages of the framework initiative. And therefore, I believe that we can, at this moment, we are very pleased what is on the draft issues note. And one last question that I would like we are talking about future-proofing the commitments on this inclusive framework. But I would not forget the necessity to present proof these very same commitments. We have to understand now what they mean and what they will entail, since we are expected to sign the Framework Convention. And this is something that we will have present during our discussions throughout our sessions until 2027 for sure. Thank you.
Thank you. Distinguished Delegate of India, followed by Switzerland.
Thank you for giving me the floor for the second time. My comment will be brief, and it's clarificatory, in the sense that when we said that things like economic efficiency, tax neutrality, simplicity, and administrability are part of the principles, we did not mean that we should expand the principles as they are written now. What we meant is that they are already part of the principles, because if you look at paragraph 9, 9G, it says that provide for rules that are simple and easy to administer, and so on. If you go through all A to I, these phrases in some form or the other are already part of the principles. So hence our comment that it is part of the principles. We did not mean that this should be added to the principles in any way. Thank you.
So just a clarification from India. So if I got you right, that you mean that what we have in the principles, we should not repeat it again in the... But you don't see that this would put a lot of limitations in drafting the commitment, because you will find many words that sometimes we use in drafting, you will find a reference for it in the principles. So and repeating what is in the principles, it's not a duplication. More that it means that we are using these principles in our work. Just putting some ideas. If you would like to come, so the floor back to India.
Yes, thank you, Chair, for that. Now, I understand what you're saying, that if it is written in one part of the document, it does not mean that it need not be repeated the other place. But we must see this in the context of the discussion that we are having, that we need to balance the commitment, the language of the commitment in between being high level and being too verbose. So if it is absolutely necessary to add language to the commitment, we are open to that. But if it is not going to add any value, and of course this is a subject that has to be decided by all members, by the Intergovernmental Committee. Our point is that if it is not going to add any value, then we could think of avoiding it. And as regards the point that was made about whether we would be limiting ourselves, sometimes writing language could limit ourselves. If we strike a right balance, then we would be in the best place.
Thank you. Distinguished Delegate of Switzerland, followed by Tanzania.
Thank you, Chairman. Good morning, everybody. After yesterday's discussion, I was afraid that our discussion regarding the topic of the fairness of allocation of taxing rights could end in the same way as the discussion on sustainability ended. That was, in that case, acceptable to many. I think we came to the conclusion we do not really know what it means, but that there are experts on sustainability that are meeting in other rooms, and they can advise us then to translate this to tax policy. So I welcome this discussion on the topic of fairness in the allocation of taxing rights very much. I agree with many of the preceding speakers and also with you, Mr. Chairman, that the convention should give a rough indication on how the term of fairness of the allocation of taxing rights is to be understood. And I also have in mind that the protocols that then implement such a commitment, that they can be signed independently from the convention itself. So I believe that there is it would be good to keep the commitment very high level. And what we have in paragraph 14 of the issues note is fine in our view, and also detailed enough already. But I also would agree with the distinguished colleague from India that tested language that could be drawn, for example, from the BEPS project, such as the concept of value creation, would be a useful approach. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Distinguished delegate of Tanzania, followed by Jamaica.
Thank you, Chair. The United Republic of Tanzania aligns itself with the statement delivered by Nigeria on behalf of the African Group and comments provided by India, ATAF, and other delegations in support of maintaining the text in line with the terms of reference. Mr. Chair, we emphasize that the Framework Convention should be sufficiently broad to ensure that the initial and the future protocols remain consistent with and relevant to the commitments already agreed under the TOR. Mr. Chair, the Convention should avoid incorporating specific principles and text that risk to limit the scope of the work to be undertaken in the current and future protocols. In this respect, Mr. Chair, specific principles and concepts such as economic efficiency and neutrality should be reserved for conclusion within the text of the relevant protocols. I thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Distinguished delegate of Jamaica, followed by United Kingdom.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Chair. Chair, in relation to the discussion that we're having now on whether or not paragraph 14 is reflective of the approach that should be used on fair allocation of taxing rights, I have to say that we are not in a position to make that determination, and I'll tell you why. In our view, paragraph 15, which asks us to discuss the issue of fair allocation of taxing rights, and in particular the elements and the additional concerns, I don't think that that is a discussion that we are having now. And I believe that paragraph 15 has to be preliminary to making a determination as it relates to paragraph 14, unless I am misunderstanding the entire discussion that we are having now. And so we stand guided here as to whether or not there is going to be a discussion on 15, in other words, a bit more granular than what I would regard in some respect as abstract at the moment, and or whether at some future point there will in fact be a discussion on what is fair allocation of taxing rights. I don't think we can take it for granted that we all have the same understanding, notwithstanding the high-level discussion and the what would seem to be reasonable principles. But I think that a discussion on 15 ought to take place before we can determine 14. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Distinguished delegate of United Kingdom, followed by Australia.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, everyone. The UK would agree with those who have suggested that the language in the commitment be kept at a higher level than what's in the issues note and something closer to what is in the terms of reference. And the two reasons why we think that: the first is it's not clear what the value would be of writing more detail into the convention that could be contained within the protocol and cross-border services. So to the extent that this is intended to point towards the protocol and cross-border services, as you suggested, we think that that could be put into the protocol instead. The second reason is that this feels very focused on corporation tax with the references to business activity. And of course, fair allocation of taxing rights, corporation tax is just one dimension of that. And so to keep the convention broad enough that it can cover all future discussions that a conference of the parties might want to have, it would make sense to keep it broader. And I just wanted to comment as well on the suggestion from Czechia that we might want to include in the overall principles for the convention, the language around economic efficiency, etc. In the terms of reference, there is a principle on simplicity and ease of administration, so I think that's already covered. But the language on economic efficiency, tax neutrality, that isn't currently covered in the principles from the terms of reference. So that might be worth us considering when we come to have that discussion on the principles for the convention as a whole. So I think we would support that.
Okay, thank you. But maybe a point that to the comment of our colleague from United Kingdom, when you are saying, if I get you right, that you are saying that this one in the convention need to be very broad and then it need to be broken down or more details in protocol one, but whatever we're going to have in protocol one, it will serve only protocol one, while what we get here in the convention, it would serve everything. And as we said at the beginning, that this commitment, especially, it will be cross-cutting almost most of the work that will be done under the convention, any protocol, current and even future protocols that will come. So just to clarify that, sure, we will have details in protocol one because this is a technical document, but the details there will be just serving the purpose of protocol one. That's why maybe I'm saying more than being the commitment need to be like high level or wide, it need to be more comprehensive, that it serve everything, include everything that can work for other things that we have in the future, more just being very high level as it's been mentioned. Just a quick comment from me on your intervention. Thank you. Distinguished delegate of Austria, followed by Chedi.
Thank you, Chair. And I think what you just mentioned is also reflected in the comments that I'm going to make right now. I think it's important, a good starting to say that it's a good starting point what we have in paragraph 14 of the issues notes, mainly because I think that the commitment needs to be high level, but at the same time already gives some broad guidance on how it's going to be understood and how, when we're going to talk about the allocation of taxing rights in the future, be it on services or other types of income, what could be our guiding principles to decide on how eventually an allocation of taxing rights could look like. And therefore, the principles mentioned and the principles of economic activity, etc., could be a broad basis. They are not an exhaustive list, I would say, eventually, but to give some guidance at least how we can understand the commitment for future work. I'm not sure why some delegates were concerned that these principles would limit the application of the commitment, because, as rightly mentioned, most of the principles are already mentioned in the convention in the principles section, so we could also argue that the principles already could limit the commitment to a certain extent. So I don't see why that would be an argument for limiting. More importantly, I think the limitation is rather that a lot of people here in the room seem to think about this commitment being the anchor for Protocol 1, for the Services Protocol, but like you just said, it's not only the anchor for this protocol, but it is broader, and therefore I think also what the UK just mentioned, I think there could be a little bit of limitation also in that sense that we're talking a bit about business income here mainly. People have services in mind, but actually it's about that the commitment as such is talking about allocation of taxing rights in general. And so I think we should probably have a little bit less limitations in that sense that we can have a broader commitment. Yeah, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, and I agree with what you said, because like here we're talking about the economic efficiency, neutrality, and simplicity, and maybe this language, for example, just giving an example, we didn't talk about it, we didn't put this in the effective dispute resolution. So does it mean that we will not have simplicity or neutrality or economic efficiency in that? No, we will have it, because whenever it's not mentioned, then we go to the principles which will guide everything. But if it's mentioned in the commitment itself, again, it doesn't hurt at all, so it's good to be there. But again, we have a reference. So if these words will limit, that means that the whole thing is limited from up there in the principles. Not necessarily that we are going to repeat all the principles in each commitment, of course. It will not make sense. But whenever it's relevant to use part or some of the principles, I think it's still work, and maybe give more meaningful meanings for the commitment. Thank you. Distinguished delegate of Chile, followed by Canada.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you also first to the co-lead chair and the secretariat for this helpful issues note. Also, thank you to delegates for their input into this discussion. It has been very helpful in order to be able to focus on the issues that we have thinking about. In our view, a high level and broad commitment is the best way forward. The word fair is subjective, of course, and we understand that word differently. But that is the work we need to work on together at this forum. We are, however, concerned when paragraph 14 introduces new wording, like business activity. It seems to be referring to corporate profits, as we have just heard from our esteemed delegate from the UK. And we therefore prefer to refer to the economic activities that we have in earlier in other documents and where economic activity takes place. So in general, I think we would align ourselves with comments by Brazil and India. In particular, we like the word crisp, a crisp definition, which is a very fresh word. So thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Distinguished delegate of Canada, followed by Kenya.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would like to add my voice to the other delegates that have expressed a preference for a formulation that is more high level of that commitment, for the reasons that were stated, that we should not constrain ourselves in what we in the approaches that we will be developed and that would be included in the protocols. So for that reason, I think it's certainly preferable to have wording that remains fairly high. And as to your specific question as to where that precise level should be, I agree with the concern that was expressed by the delegate from the UK, that business activity seems to be tied to corporate tax, and probably I would have a similar concern with other concepts like value creation. So I'm not sure whether we need to go to that level of precision in that commitment. On the other hand, I think better approach might be to focus on the characters that we think that should be met that the allocation of taxing rights should be meeting. And to that extent, I agree with the previous comments that fairness is important, but as was said, it's a difficult concept to define. And as a matter of balance, I would think it would be important to add also references to the other objectives, such as equity, tax neutrality, ease of administration. And I fully agree that if that it's important within that commitment to refer to these other objectives, because that's the cross of what we're trying to achieve here. So I don't think we're losing anything, or that it's would be unduly redundant to state these objectives here again. And as was said by the delegate from the UK, some of those objectives are not currently stated in the principle that are in the terms of reference. So it might be that's something we might want to consider as well, whether we should expand a bit what we have in the principle right now. Thank you.
Thank you. But to this point, and to your point now, about, again, the business activity as it has been raised a few times now. I'm trying to link the comments we are receiving today with what we received yesterday. So yesterday, I think it was a comment from one of the CEOs about the business activity and whether it might or might not, in his opinion, that it's not capturing the remote sales, and it's better to use end user than this. So when we are talking about business activity and saying it may be limited to corporate tax, again, we get yesterday other feedback that it's not limited, but also there is a limitation because maybe it's not capturing as well the remote sales when we talk about business activity. And using end user can be a better replacement for it. So this is another question for everyone, if we would like. I think we need to explore, because I see like a broad acceptance or for the language in 14 to some extent. But if we are willing to accept or it's to some level acceptable for us, so we need to navigate the concepts or the expressions that we have. And I think the core one is business activity. And now we get some comments on the term business activity, and we get also yesterday. So maybe it will be good if we like dive deeply a little bit in this concept and see what does it mean. So we resume the floor. Just a quick comment for everyone to think about. The distinguished delegate of Kenya, followed by Belgium.
Thank you, Chair. We align ourselves with the comments that were made yesterday by Nigeria on behalf of the Africa Group, and also agree with the comments that have been made by India today. And it's good you've brought the issue of business activity, because that's exactly what we wanted to address in our comments. We especially find the use of the words business activity difficult to interpret and restrictive. Because if, for example, we're looking at the digital economy, there are certain features of the digital economy that would give rise to income that should be taxable in the source jurisdiction, but it would be very difficult to place them within the definition of a business activity, because technically speaking, there would be no activity, but there is income that is going to arise in the source jurisdiction, and it should be taxable, but it wouldn't be classified or defined as an activity. So we find business activity very restrictive, and we would have an issue with adoption of those words. Yes, paragraph 14 says that there should be room for defining what business activity would entail, but we think that the commitment should be clear from its first reading. And having to define business activity would mean that the commitment would not be clear from its first reading. On the issue of principles on efficiency, neutrality, simplicity, we agree with what the delegate from India said, that these are rightly placed in the principles. And I believe the principles which are in the TORs are also going to be adopted in the Framework Convention, as opposed to having them specifically in this particular commitment. We say this because we see a risk of having these principles within the wording of this commitment as qualifying the implementation of fair allocation of taxing rights. And as you'd rightly said, Chair, these are principles that are going to apply across all the documents. And we haven't adopted these principles in the commitment on effective dispute resolution and prevention, but they will still apply. So we don't see the need of particularly adopting them in the commitment on fair allocation of taxing rates, again, because of the risk of qualifying fair allocation of taxing rates. So we do see them as rightly being placed in the principles section, as opposed to adopting them in each and every commitment that we are going to adopt. So we support adopting a broadly worded commitment, and the elaboration that we could adopt has already been adopted in Resolution 78 to 30, and that's by using the words economic activity, where economic activity occurs, value is created, and from where revenues are generated. And we find that broad enough to even include, for example, the features that we are talking about in the digital economy that wouldn't be qualified or classified as activities. So broad wording, if there's any elaboration, it should be the elaboration in 78 to 30, as opposed to adding new wording that would have to be explained, such as business activity. Thank you, Chair.
So getting back to Kenya comment, so Kenya, you're proposing to use economic activity. And I have a comment here, and I think Patricia also will come on in this. She has another comment. When you are saying business activity, you believe that it doesn't capture the digital one. But when we are talking about activity, why we are limiting it to the physical activity only? If a company is doing digital activity in another country, does it considered as a business activity? That's what's happening now, that countries are doing business in the market jurisdiction, but remotely. And doing business is a sort of activity. So here may be a question from my side that, do we need to define what's meant by business activity? In the section of definitions, for example, in the convention, to give it the broad meaning that we need? Because I think for using the economic activity, Patricia also have an opinion on this. So Patricia?
Sorry, the Secretariat does not have opinions, but we do have questions. and I think this is a general question, because Switzerland, the distinguished representative of Switzerland, said earlier that, I'm sorry, it was Portugal that said there's a danger in being vague, and you could create more disputes. And I think if the language from 78 to 30, which it would obviously be very easy to just copy, I think that some countries would view the economic activity to be where the IP is developed and where the production takes place. And so at the end of the Africa Group's intervention yesterday, the delegate from Nigeria said, but we want to protect the source state and the market. And source also is debatable. Where's the source? Where the IP is developed, where the market is. So I think there is a danger in not spelling these things out. Now, maybe you use the language from 78 to 30 and then you have explanatory material that says what it means. But in any case, there has to be an agreement on what it means, whether it's in the commitment or in the explanatory material. And I'm seeing if the language is too high level, you will just be setting yourself up for more disputes, which work stream 3 will then resolve, I guess.
So I think we have it's not only in tax, in all social studies, different terminologies all the time have different interpretation from different people. Everyone see it and interpret the concepts and the words in a different way. So maybe that's why we need to select what is the proper expression and define it as well. So to be clear about this and not to be so high level, to be, as our colleague from Portugal mentioned, to be vague. So we are creating the issue by ourselves more than we are solving it. Thank you. Distinguished delegate of Belgium, followed by United Arab Emirates.
Thank you, Chair. I would also like to thank the Secretariat and the co-lead Daniel for all the work done on Workstream 1. And aside from that, I want to say that we would like to align ourselves with the comments made by the distinguished delegates of Canada and UK before us. We believe that a high-level commitment on the fair allocation of taxing rights will get a broader support also, and so we are happy to see that there is the reference to the economic principles like efficiency and tax neutrality, and we would like to see them stated under the principles if possible. And thanks to Patricia already for the clarification on business activity, but I think if we use it in the commitment, then we should also define it in a way in the definitions. And we already see that there is a lot of room of misinterpretation, so maybe we should think further about the use of the word business activity or explain it in the definitions if the choice was to use the business activity. I think it is a bit difficult to interpret at this moment. Thank you.
Thank you. Distinguished delegate of United Arab Emirates, followed by Colombia.
As this is our first intervention, we would like to thank the chair, co-lead, and the Secretariat for the work done so far. We agree with many, such as India, Tanzania, and Norway, Chile, and UK, on keeping the commitments as high level with the technical details to be covered in the protocols. While we see merit on discussing the commitment being more specific, we agree with the comments from UK, Austria, and Canada that this might create unforeseen limitations. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Distinguished delegate of Colombia, followed by Netherlands.
Agradecemos al presidente de los colíderes, la secretaría y a los demás miembros de los estados por todo este trabajo respecto a este compromiso y el trabajo que se ha realizado en el grupo 1. Desde Colombia estamos de acuerdo en que este compromiso debe ser de alto nivel, pero que también debe ser amplio, como lo decían otras delegaciones, para que sirva de base para nuestras decisiones futuras. Para Colombia es muy importante que se haya planteado la necesidad de garantizar una asignación justa de los derechos de imposición, donde, como lo han mencionado Chile y otros delegados, será necesario tener clara esta definición de asignación justa, dado que puede llevar a mucha subjetividad y diferencias de interpretación, pero para nosotros lo importante es que no se pierda de vista que esta asignación debe ir en línea con el principio de que todos los países deben tener la capacidad de gravar las actividades que se desarrollan dentro de su territorio o que afectan sus mercados. Resaltamos la necesidad de que se expanda la tributación de la economía digital, particularmente en países emergentes y que sean importadores de capital y servicios. Y esto particularmente es relevante en los casos en los que no hay presencia física de las empresas que tienen estas actividades en nuestros países, lo que no implica que no se estén generando estos ingresos en los mismos. Por lo tanto, y en línea con lo dicho por Chile, India, China, Kenia, Nigeria y el Grupo Africano y otros delegados, consideramos relevante que lo señalaba en el parágrafo 14 de las notas respecto a la necesidad de explicar cómo determinar dónde se da la actividad empresarial, se reconozca que dentro de esta actividad empresarial están incluidos los derechos tributarios sobre los ingresos que generan estas actividades en el país de la fuente cuando no hay presencia física. Esta es la manera de proteger el recaudo tributario, evitando que se reduzca la capacidad de generación de ingresos y asegurando la distribución justa de los derechos impositivos entre los países. Gracias.
Thank you. Distinguished delegate of Netherlands, followed by Estonia.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you to the Secretariat and the co-lead as well for all the work done so far. We agree with other distinguished delegates before us that mentioned that the commitments should be drafted high level. The way it is drafted on the screen now is, in our view, too restrictive. We agree also with other statements, and what has also been reflected in the issues note is that there are many different interpretations of what is fair. And like my colleague of the UK, amongst others, mentioned, it should not be limited to business activity or to corporate taxation. In order to achieve broad participation of the Framework Convention, the commitments need to be formulated as high level as possible. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Distinguished delegate of Estonia, followed by Canada.
Thank you, Chair. Listening to the previous speakers, it seems that it might make sense to prepare a rough outline of the draft convention that would show the structure of it. That, I think, might take care of half of the discussion we've had here, whether the principles should be mentioned with each commitment or whether they should form a general provisions of the Framework Convention. And from the point of view of legal drafting, we would definitely prefer them to be in the general provisions of the Framework Convention, which means that all the commitments would need to be based on these principles as well. And if we need to make any exceptions, this is something we could make in the more specific parts of the convention. As to high-level commitments versus the vague commitments, it's a very fine art of drafting something that is general enough, but not vague. And it takes a lot of skill, and I hope we'll be able to do it, because all of us would need to go back to our governments and explain what are we really committing to. And for us, it would be of crucial importance to at least know whether we are only referring to the corporate income tax here or to any other taxes as well. And from our perspective, business activity and economic activity are the same things, meaning that they are both profit-generating activities as opposed to charitable activities. But what I would see as referring more to the corporate income tax is the word income here. And in this sense, I agree with my Kenyan colleague that the word revenue might be better here if we want to, and this needs to be discussed, if we want to cover more than a corporate income tax here. And I also agree that where we are saying that whether now it's a business or economic activity takes place, that does seem to be referring to a physical place of activity. Thank you.
Thank you. Distinguished Delegate of Canada, followed by Liechtenstein.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and apologies for taking the floor again. I just want to follow up on something that the Secretariat has said about the risk of dispute to which this commitment could lead. I think I could understand the risk of dispute under eventually the first protocol, but it's less clear to me what exactly that risk would be under the commitment per se. So I would appreciate if maybe you could elaborate and provide your views as to what that risk would be, or an example. Thank you.
Sorry, can you come back again on this? I didn't get the question.
Sorry. It was just in reaction to what was said earlier by the Secretariat that we need to clarify the commitment to avoid a risk of dispute. It wasn't clear to me exactly what that risk is in this context.
No, I think the Secretariat was referring to what our colleague from Portugal mentions, that sometimes when it's very high level or the commitments turn to be vague. So, and in this case, different interpretation, and it can generate disputes because different understanding. So that's why we need to be careful in keeping a high level, and also not to be vague in some of the concepts that can generate sort of disputes as we go forward. And I see in the screens that our colleague from Portugal will come again. So we will hear from him again. That's what, right, Patricia? I think what Patricia meant when she talked about this. So distinguished delegate of Liechtenstein, followed by Pakistan.
Thank you, Chair, for giving me the floor. We would like to align ourselves with what the UK and Belgium said, and also with the first comment of Canada to keep the commitments at a rather high level, and leaving the technical details rather to the optional protocols. But of course, we would like to see also the principles like tax neutrality, simplicity, and administrability reflected in this commitment, as these also provide a kind of base if we talk about the fair allocation of taxing rights. Thank you.
I think in order to make the discussion move forward, I think most of the people here, if not all, we agree that it needs to be kept in a high level. So there's sort of agreement on this right now, if I understand the flow right. But I think what we're going to have in this high level statement that we're going to have in the commitment, we talked about the business activities, revenues, economic activity, different things. Also, the second question here raises a very good point, that there is this question B in section 15, paragraph 15. You'll find there are additional, the question if there is any additional concerns regarding the fair allocation of taxing rights that should be addressed in that article of the framework. So now we are talking about what will be the basis set by the article, by the commitment, value creation, for example. In the work stream, there was many countries like against the concept of value creation. So what about value creation? And now we talked about economic and we talked about business activity. And we have different alternatives in this. So yes, I agree with everyone here that it will be kept on a high level. But what will be in this high level? I think this is another question also that we need to explore together. Distinguished Delegate of Pakistan, followed by Zambia.
Thank you, Chair. We would like to appreciate you and the Secretariat as well as the co-lead for very useful issue notes on Workstream 1. And we would just like to add our voice to what has already been said on the second part by Nigeria, Brazil, India, and others. We do believe that the terms in this principles part can be too broad and open to interpretation and can entail vague commitments. So as you said, this is the core part of the convention. And we believe that we should not tie this down to too much explanation. So on the second part, we would support the call to keep it focused and simple. Thank you.
Thank you. Distinguished Delegate of Zambia, followed by Mexico.
Thank you, Chair, for giving me the floor, and thank you for the work done so far on the work stream. I know Secretariat said economic activity may not be the best to replace business activity, so I kept wondering and saying, so do we have a solution to what wording is going to make everybody happy, because we seem to be going back and forth on the same thing. So I do hope that we get something and make progress in due time. I just thought I should just express that our views on this, and we do agree with what everybody has actually said in keeping it high level and not going into detail. There is probably no need to elaborate any further. But however, I just thought that we should mention that we do agree fairness is subjective, and we believe that trying to define any term, business activity, fairness, in the commitment section of the convention would be probably, I think, too premature. So we agree that maybe that could be kept maybe in the protocols as well. And the effort should be focused on drafting a commitment language that would capture the essence of all the articles as well. That's our view. I thank you.
Thank you. Distinguished Delegate of Mexico, followed by Portugal.
Thank you very much, Chair. Good morning, everybody. I think at this point, hearing the word commitment makes me think of something that just recently happened in July, the Compromiso de Sevilla. I think we would be very blind to not go back to what was already a high-level commitment approved by heads of state and government in Sevilla at the beginning of July, in which we have paragraph 28E, 28 on subnational finance, which begins with strengthening international tax cooperation, ensuring that international tax rules respond to the diverse needs, priorities, and capacities of all countries, especially in developing countries. And then subparagraph E, which I think that personally it kind of elegantly brings a solution to the discussion between whether this is business related or economic activity, because it says we will make sure that all companies, including multinationals, pay taxes to the governments of countries where economic activity occurs and value is created in accordance with national and international laws and policies. This, by highlighting multinational and companies, already talks about business, and it has specific references to economic activity and value creation. So if this is something that we just adopted at high level by consensus, may I say, in July at a UN conference, then we would be wise to see that as a way forward, because it already bridges some of the proposals here, and it's already a high level commitment that we can just reinsert here and then take the principles and see where we can go and define what goes within each principle so that everybody gets a fair share of what their interests are really, reflected to the principles we already established in the terms of reference. So maybe this could be a way forward, because if we're talking about high-level commitments on tax, we just basically did that a month ago in Sevilla. So maybe take that and complement it for the convention and see how we can find more complementarities within these processes. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. But before moving forward, I'm getting back to our colleague from Zambia, when she referred about the Secretariat said that the economic activity is limited to the IB and till the end. But the Secretariat is not giving opinion again, as Patricia said. But just we're trying to move the discussions forward. So it was a question. And actually, the Secretariat is the one holding the pen. And as some of you mentioned, that the text will be more clear if we have a text in front of us, or when it comes to the text. And this is from where the source of the text that will be written and presented later to the committee is coming from these discussions. So because after we finish the plenary, after the next week, we sit with the Secretariat and we start talking about what we get from the floor so we can draft. And instead of coming with a draft out of nowhere, just from our heads, from our opinions, and put it to the member states to discuss. So to make sure that the negotiations is going in let's use the right word, is going in a good and right direction, peaceful way. So that we get from you first, then we again reflect this in text and send it to you. So what we are hearing now, that's what almost everyone will see on the text. Not every single opinion, because we will take the direction of the floor, the majority of the floor, and that's what we're going to reflect it in the text. Distinguished delegate of Portugal, followed by Philippines.
Thank you, Chair, and my apologies for taking the ground the second time this round, for this morning. I've noticed that our observation in respect of vagueness is being probably it was somehow misunderstood, in the sense that what we fear in a possible vagueness of our commitments, especially this commitment on fair allocation of taxing rights, is somehow in line what our colleague from Estonia had said. It hinders our reading and our explanation of what this commitment means for our hierarchy, who in first stance will have to decide if they sign or not the Framework Convention. Then we can have a second level discussion, not a dispute, but a discussion on the Conference of Parties in relation to what this commitment should direct the action of the Framework Convention. But we are not that sure that this vagueness, at least it was not our intention to preempt that this vagueness could give rise to tax disputes, which are the object of Protocol 2. I believe that when we are afraid of vagueness in the commitments, we are not in the context of tax disputes yet. So therefore, but I cannot speak for the Secretariat. And but this was our idea. Thank you very much.
Thank you. The Secretariat of Philippines, followed by Jamaica.
Concerning the suggested commitments in paragraph 14, which proposes that the parties agree on approach to allocate taxing rights, recognizing that each jurisdiction where business activity occurs should participate in taxing the income generated from such activities. The Philippines comments as follows. So while this underlying principle is welcomed and aligns with our aspirations for a fairer global tax system, the critical aspect for developing nations lies on precisely how where business activity takes place is defined and how we envision this to be operationalized. The Philippines asserts that this definition must recognize market jurisdiction as a primary driver of value creation. The commitment should also clearly articulate the principle of source-based taxation as a fundamental and reinforced pillar for developing countries, ensuring that they can effectively tax income derived from activities within their borders, particularly those that extract value from their domestic markets. The Framework Convention should also foster flexible and pragmatic approaches to addressing profit shifting and low taxation. This flexibility is crucial for developing countries to design and implement administratively feasible solutions align with our national development priorities and ensure sufficient fiscal space without being constrained by rigid frameworks or commitments that may not suit our specific circumstances, administrative capacity, or revenue needs. The emphasis on simplicity and administratability should translate into clear, prescriptive rules rather than complex negotiation-heavy frameworks that can be difficult for resource-constrained tax administrations to implement and enforce. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Distinguished Delegate of Jamaica.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just trying to clarify. Are we now discussing 15B, meaning the additional concerns regarding fair allocation of taxing rights? And I'm not sure what the expectation is. Is it that we are to name some of these additional concerns, or is it that we are to make a determination on how the additional concerns will be addressed in the Framework Convention? I'm just seeking clarity from the Chair.
So, our colleague from Jamaica, if I get your question right, your question is about 15B. 15B is what it's opening the door to add to the commitment in general, to add to the issues that we have, or to add to 14, 13, whatever concerns that still need to be considered in the issue notes. It is not limited to the commitment itself. We are again getting the commitment. The commitment will be drafted based on the discussion and what we have in the issue notes. That's how it will be reflected. So, do we need to add to it any more concerns or points or areas so we get it, so we can reflect it when we are drafting the commitment? This is what is meant by 15B. We are not talking about 14. Maybe most of the discussion went to 14 because it's giving a good language, or seen as a good language from most of the people here. But we are not focusing on it. Whatever concern need to be added as a part of the issues, or to be added as a part of the language, or whatever, so we can go with it back home and use it in our drafting. Hopefully I answered your question.
Okay.
If you have questions, you can ask. Yeah.
No, it's okay, Chair. It's okay.
Distinguished Delegate of Mexico.
Thank you very much, Chair. I just wanted to come in to pick up on something you mentioned a couple minutes ago. So is it my understanding and our understanding that the Secretariat is holding the pen in this process, but this is supposed to be a member-led state process? Because if that's the case, then I think most of our questions can be submitted to the Secretariat, and then can come back with some questions, and then we can proceed from there. But I would expect that the Chair would be the one guiding this and having the pen, because then that creates a problem for us as Mexico, because we're only doing this as member states because this is a committee, and then it creates this dynamic in which when we leave this room, then it goes back to the pen holder, and that's not member states. So just want to make sure that I got it right, or get some clarification on that side so I can inform my capital moving forward. Thank you.
Okay, yes, sure, the Secretariat is the one holding the event. And when we say holding the event, the Secretariat is the one who is doing all this work. Sure, the chair is not the one who write all these issue notes and did all the work, and is not the one who's taking all the notes. Most of the time listening to everyone. We have Secretariat and we have our colleagues at the back of this room are taking notes. Then when we go and read all of this together, me with the Secretariat, and someone need to have the keyboard and start writing, then it's being discussed with the chair, then it go to the work streams, then here where we are saying it's a member-led, member states-led process, then the member states start to discuss, they have the option, but at least someone need to put the first draft, and no need to someone to go like back to the Secretariat after we leave, because the room is open here for everyone to give the questions, and the questions are not for the Secretariat, actually. The questions here to be answered by other member states. This is the dialogue, and you are just monitoring the dialogue, taking the feedback, and someone need to hold the pen and write this feedback, then present it again to the floor, to the member states in the work stream and in the plenary. Then it's being discussed. It can be 100% changed in the discussion, partially changed, whatever case, whatever scenario can happen. But someone need to have the keyboard and write what's happening and have the text. That's what we mean by holding the pen. But it doesn't mean at all that the Secretariat they are putting their own opinion on the papers, and just that's the fact that we have. Again, it's the members, and the Secretariat is serving the member states here in this room by giving them this support. Thank you. So now going to the multi-stakeholders, International Chamber of Commerce.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. The business community very much values the draft issues notes references to principles such as economic efficiency, tax neutrality, simplicity and administrability, as well as the potential impact of any changes on cross-border trades and investments. However, we would also urge the committee to explicitly include the provision of tax certainty as a guiding principle within this commitment. Returning to the concept of fairness, an interesting discussion so far this morning, as the draft issues notes rightly points out, perceptions of what constitutes a fair allocation of taxing rights are inherently subjective, and we're conscious that these perceptions may vary significantly across jurisdictions, shaped by each country's unique economic structure, their fiscal needs, policy priorities, and historical experience. We firmly believe that fairness, particularly in a legal and tax policy context, should emerge from principles-based rules that are transparent, objective, and embedded in legally binding and democratically adopted provisions. Ultimately, rules that ensure predictability, equal treatment, and due process are the ones that make tax systems fair in practice. And prompted by some of the discussion this morning, when delegates do move on to the detailed discussions of potential Protocol 1, whether that be in relation to income, profits, or economic activity, and however that is defined, maybe a broad-based business advisory group could help in this regard. Perhaps building on the Secretariat's questions as well, I'd also like to encourage delegates to consider the appropriate allocation of the costs of investment, the return on that investment, and the reward and risks that are incurred, particularly in relation to the development of technology or creation of infrastructure, and the consequent recognition not only of income but of losses and the value of intangible assets. Finally, the formulation of this commitment will inevitably raise important questions about the coherence and coexistence with the existing international framework. This includes bilateral tax treaties, model conventions, and domestic legislation. and it will be absolutely necessary to consider how any new rules or approaches can be aligned and integrated into existing instruments such as these without creating duplication, inconsistencies or further uncertainty. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Distinguished representative of ATAF.
Thank you, Chair, for giving us the floor. ATAF want to just emphasize that it seems to have been a consensus that most parties want us to keep the commitment language high level. And the debate we have had here this morning about the inclusion of economic activities or business activities, the definition of fairness, among others, have summarily illustrated the need to keep the language high level. And we want to observe that the terms of reference have given us a kind of leg up by outlining the principles which we believe will be adopted into the convention itself. So to that extent, we would want to advise members and parties to expand the principles when it is time to discuss the principles, and then leave everything about principles in the segment that deals with principles. In the principles which we have adopted in the TOR, you would say simplicity. Simplicity means you cannot come to the commitment segment and start repeating the principles there. It doesn't make it simple. It doesn't also make it simple to leave the definition section of the Framework Convention and start defining terms in the context of the commitment segment. To that extent, Chair, we feel that the best way to make progress will be to look at the broad outline which has been enumerated in paragraph 10 of the TOR as a guiding principle to develop a guidance to developing the language of commitment, and then allow the details, including the motivations and the criteria and the basis for the commitment, to be elaborated in the context of the protocol. Chair, we're talking about value creation as possible basis for fair allocation of taxing, right? But in the context of tax treaties, for instance, it may not be exactly so. You may not have to have some sort of political considerations or some other element which are not necessarily tied to value creation as basis for shared taxing rights. And what we are saying is no matter what criteria that is used, parties should ensure that there is fairness. Fairness could mean a lot of things to many parties in different contexts, and that's how it has always been. Chair, on those comments of ours, we yield back. Thank you.
Thank you. Distinguished representative of Major Group for Children and Youth.
Thank you, Chair. I take the floor on behalf of the Major Group of Children and Youth. Chair, we believe that multinational corporations and high network individuals must be taxed in countries where economic activities take place. Whereas these countries benefit from the labor, resources, markets that young people across these source countries offer, children and youth do not receive the corresponding benefits in terms of service delivery due to lack of domestic public resources. Ensuring fair taxing rights is essential to correct historical imbalances in global tax rules that have enabled transfer pricing, aggressive tax planning, and tax evasion that recent solutions under the BEPS inclusive framework have not been able to adequately solve. In addition, new global tax deals require more than agreements between individual countries, but the active participation of the private sector and specificity. As a result, we urge the committee to actively create a convention which draws upon the youth to fill the gap between private and public sectors. An equitable convention is unachievable without average participation and transparency from both sides. And as a future, youth involvement is the connecting point. Finally, with the reallocation of tax rights, we stand to highlight the importance of upholding and protecting labor laws, specifically with more preventative measures against child labor. Increased taxation against multinational companies often results in them taking more cost-effective methods, the first of which being decreasing wages and the safety of work conditions and relying on child labor. Chair, we must ensure during the process in which we eliminate the evasive strategies of multinational corporations, we protect the safety and interest of children and youth. History has demonstrated that marginalized groups are always the first victims from cost-cutting measures against the private sector. And we must ensure that we are not being left behind. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Distinguished representative of African Union.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, the African Union aligns its intervention with the position of the Africa Group, Kenya, Tanzania, Zambia, ATF, and extends its sincere appreciation to the co-leads and the Secretariat for their continued leadership in this vital process. The African Union therefore strongly supports the inclusion of clear ambitions, commitments within the Framework Convention on fair allocation of taxing rights, including the equitable taxation of multilateral cooperation and enterprises. In our view, such a commitment should avoid prescriptive definitions of where business activities take place. Instead, we call for a commitment that is grounded in the language of paragraph 10A of the Terms of Reference. We also acknowledge the profound transformation brought about by digitalization, which is rapidly increasing the mobility of people, goods, services, capital flows, outpacing the current reach of traditional tax rules that we have had for a long time. The convention must be forward-looking and adaptable, equipping developing countries, especially those in Africa, with the tools to safeguard their taxing rights in this new landscape. Mr. Chair, the wording in paragraph 10A of the Terms of Reference, therefore, offers a principled foundation for further elaboration through future protocols, while maintaining the necessary flexibility to respond to a changing world. Let us be cautious not to embed rigid definitions or overly technical thresholds in the Convention itself. Doing so would risk codifying the very inequalities that the Convention seeks to redress. Our shared objectives must be to establish a fair and enduring framework, one that empowers all countries to mobilize domestic resources, uphold their sovereignty, and invest in the development priorities. Mr. Chair, domestic resource mobilization through taxation for us, it's not merely an abstract ideal. It is the cornerstone of sustainable development and the achievement of Africa's Agenda 2063. Determining whether governments can build schools, fund hospitals, and protect the vulnerable in our societies, especially women and girls. The fair allocation of taxing rights is not merely a marginal issue. It is central for our common agenda of building a more just and inclusive global economy. We are not seeking special treatment, but we are seeking a level playing field where rules are designed for all and apply to all and benefit all. The African Union urges this commitment to reflect a shared political understanding that no country, especially in the global south, should be structurally excluded from the benefits of global value chain. Let us seize this opportunity to lay the foundation for a fairer international tax order that is truly one that leaves no one behind. Thank you.
Thank you, distinguished representative of ICTD.
Hello. I wanted to pick up on some of the concerns raised by member states that as it's written now, the commitment could be seen as limited to income taxation or corporate income taxation. In that sense, I'd like to submit the suggestion that one could think of splitting the commitment up into two commitments, a general one that could be applicable to all kinds of taxes, and a second commitment that could try to define what, or to add further context to what fair allocation of taxing rights could mean in the specific context of income taxation or corporate income taxation, in order to not generally limit the reach of the commitment to fair allocation of taxing rights.
Thank you. So, sorry for these silence moments, but we were discussing whether to go for a break or we don't have time, so better to continue. So I think it's better to continue, and we can close a little bit earlier than 1 o'clock, because we will go now and we'll come just for half an hour. So we're going to continue, resume our discussions. So now we wrote down some questions that we need to discuss and explore with everyone. So the idea of sharing the taxing rights with the market jurisdiction. Is this idea is acceptable for everyone? Distinguished delegate of Nigeria.
Chair, I think, looking at our discussions since Monday, there have been a lot of discussion as to staying at high level and elaborating. I think these your questions, in my view, you may need to elaborate for us to understand it.
Okay, so the question another way. Does the market jurisdictions are getting their fair tax rights right now? Distinguished delegate of Estonia.
Yes, they do in consumption taxes.
I like the discussion. Okay, so so good. So they are getting the consumption taxes. What about the income one? Distinguished delegate of Germany.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. With all due respect, but I think the question is too general in order to be answered seriously. And any such answer could also be incompatible with the principles on which we already seem to have agreed and the terms of reference. Maybe we can make use of the time, and since I already have the floor, allow me to share some confusion. It is not for the first time that I struggle to make the distinction between principles and commitments. And maybe if we could discuss that further, it could help us in our common understanding of where to put into the text the considerations that we need to apply in order to come to a commitment that that we are striving for. So, and what I'm alluding to is, according to the terms of reference, commitments are something, quote unquote, to achieve objectives, while principles, quote unquote, are something that guide the achievement of the Framework Convention's objectives. So, and this leaves me with the question, where's the difference? The only thing that I can say for sure is that according to paragraph 14 of the terms of reference, it is up to the protocols to implement and elaborate the Framework Convention. So therefore, to some extent, it doesn't seem to matter where we would put the considerations into the text, either before the bracket, or kind of before the brackets, under the principles, or as part of the individual commitment. However, I haven't thought it entirely through, and therefore I would appreciate if the room or the Secretariat could help clarifying the difference, again, between the commitment section and the principles. Thank you.
Okay, to our colleague from Germany. I think the difference between the principle section and the commitment, I think here you are referring to the convention. The principles is like the guiding framework for the commitment. And the principles, as we said yesterday, I think almost we have it in the TOR. So it will be just moved to the convention, maybe with additions if needed. But this will be like the framework, the frames that guide us, that you can't go, no one of the commitments that you will put on the member states who will sign should go apart from these principles. But we can keep talking about the difference between principles and commitment for a long time. I think when we have the text of the convention, that will make it very clear. Not we will make it very clear, the member states will make it very clear. Because I remember that we went through this similar conversation in the TOR while we are doing the principle section and the commitment section, and we kept shifting, like some topics we open it, then we say, okay, it's more like a principle to be guiding more than to be a commitment. I think we're going to have a first draft of the convention soon, and I think the same discussion also will go the same way, in which we will be reading and saying, okay, no, it's better to go for principles, it's better to keep in the commitment. Already it's there in the principles, so we don't need to repeat it, it's different language. So this is my quick answer to your question. I think we went through the same experience before, and I think it will be the same this time. And without the text, no one will be able just to give very specific definition what should be here and what should be there. Okay, so it looks like we've been discussing for more than 2 hours and a half now. So, and everyone is exhausted until we have some questions. So I prefer to go for some rest. Then we come back to continue the discussions on the same topic. So, okay. Distinguished Delegate of Germany, please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for giving me the floor again. We can take it offline and maybe follow up on that after the lunch break, because, of course, I have given it some thought, and I have my own understanding. I know that we have been discussing, or had been discussing this in the ad hoc committee lengthily, but it was a similar discussion, but not maybe exactly the same that we are having right now, because back then it was, for example, about which principles this committee, the INC, has to pursue in negotiating the framework convention. That is a different question from the one that I raised. The principles that will be put into the framework convention next to the commitments which will be put into the framework convention. So I would say, it is my understanding that once the TOR principles are translated, maybe even verbally, into the Framework Convention, they serve for everyone who's signing up to the convention kind of as a commitment. So everyone would have to follow those principles, and is then, for example, committed to paragraph 9, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, accountability of all taxpayers, as well as a holistic sustainable development perspective. So, and that raises the question, where's the added value next to the commitments? So if you ask me, I would say the commitments are, and I want to stress it, not action-orientated, but they are somewhat more process or result-orientated, more related to specific subjects compared to the principles. Yes? Thank you. But again, I'm happy to discuss that further.
Thank you. And it's time for having some rest for all of you and for me as well. Yes. It's difficult to be sitting here. So I think we now it's time for lunch break, and we will convene again in the same room at 3 p.m. to resume our discussions. Thank you all, and have a nice lunch break.